Thank you, Jim. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the South Fork. Our minister, the Reverend Kimberly Quinn Johnson, leads the majority of our services. On days when she is not available, one of our worship associates leads the service. Today is one of those days. I am Mark Potter. Our musician is Jim Turner, and Carl Wittenberg is our tech expert. Monica Cesada's camera brings the service live into Zoom. Please direct your technical questions to them through the chat, and that's for the Zoomers. As Unitarian Universalists, we follow no creed or doctrine. Here we strive to respect the inherent worth and dignity of every being, to honor each person's search for truth and meaning, to encourage peace, compassion, and justice for all nations, all races, all colors, the people of this world. In our actions outside this meeting house, we strive to help those in need, the homeless, the hungry, and the neglected. The only salvation we offer is right here, right now, a community of loving friends offering comfort and guidance. The few rituals we follow in this gathering are symbols of hope that these principles may gather strength in our own hearts and beyond the walls of our meeting house. The songs we sing elevate these principles to bind us emotionally as a community. Wherever you are on your life's journey, whatever your name for the sacred, you are very welcome here. So let's begin with announcements. Later this week, on Wednesday of this week, evening at 7, our Faith Formation team offers the first in a PBS series called Prophetic Voices. This first film features Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German theologian who was arrested for his outspoken resistance to the Nazi genocide and executed in April of 1945. We'll take the time after the film to discuss his thoughts about taking personal responsibility in a time of crisis. And don't forget, on Saturday, we'll all gather here together for a retreat to consider our goals, our values, and how best to return to the new normal of living with COVID. If you haven't RSVP'd, please do. Our team will send another announcement out later this week so you can do that. Then on Sunday, October 23rd, we're all invited to bring to the meeting house the cats, dogs, and parrots and other animals that have helped us through the isolation of the last few years. Reverend Kimberly will be in the pulpit to celebrate our blessing of the animals. You can find more information about how to connect to events this week in your e-bulletin and on the events calendar on our website. Please get information you would like to announce to the congregation to our administrator by Tuesday of the week you would like them announced. She will include them in our e-bulletin. If you have an announcement you would like to make today, now is the best time to share it rather than in joys and concerns. Do we have any visitors who would like to introduce themselves? Yes, I'm sorry.
Is it an announcement about the November 5th?
Thank you, Mark. Yes, November 5th, I keep forgetting to send it in on Tuesday. There's a little food pantry fundraiser here, and it is extended to our neighbors and resident neighbors in the meeting house, Ocean Zendo, Islamic Center of the Hamptons, the Shine Studio, and us. And that's Saturday, and it's a brunch and a fundraiser for the little food pantry. So we'll see you then, 10:30. Thank you.
And are there any visitors who would like to introduce themselves? Well, if you're visiting, if you're visiting through Zoom, please sign our virtual guest book using the link in the chat, and someone from our Care and Connection team will be in touch with you. In your chat, you can also find a link to today's order of service and the lyrics to the hymns we will be singing together. So for our chalice lighting, John, would you like the chalice for us? They were written by Charles A. Howe. It encourages us to open our minds to new ideas. We light this chalice to affirm that new light is ever waiting to break through to enlighten our ways, that new truth is ever waiting to break through to illumine our minds, and that new love is ever waiting to break through to warm our hearts. May we be open to this light and to the rich possibilities that it brings us.
The opening words today were written 90 years ago by the poet Richard Eberhart. In June, amid the golden fields, I saw a groundhog lying dead. Dead lay he. My senses shook and mind outshot our naked frailty. There, lowly in the vigorous summer, his form began its senseless change and made my senses waver dim, seeing nature ferocious in him. Inspecting close maggot's might and seething cauldron of his being, half with loathing, half with a strange love, I poked him with an angry stick. The fever arose, became a flame, and vigor circumscribed the skies. Immense energy in the sun, and through my frame a sunless trembling. My stick had done nor good nor harm. Then stood I silent in the day, watching the object as before, and kept my reverence for knowledge, trying for control, to be still, to quell the passion of the blood, until I had bent down upon my knees, praying for joy in the sight of decay. And so I left, and I returned in autumn, strict of eye, to see the sap gone out of the groundhog. But the bony, sodden hulk remained. But the year had lost its meaning, and in intellectual chains, I lost both love and loathing, mured up in the wall of wisdom. Another summer took the fields again, massive and burning, full of life. But when I chanced upon the spot, there was only a little hair left, and bones bleaching in the sunlight, beautiful as architecture. I watched them like a geometer and cut a walking stick from a birch. It has been 3 years now. There is no sign of the groundhog. I stood there in the whirling summer, my hand clapped a withered heart, and thought of China and of Greece, of Alexander in his tent, of Montaigne in his tower, of Saint Teresa in her wild lament.
So now please rise as you are able. We'll sing together Love Will Guide Us, hymn number 131. Jim Turner will lead us in this song.
Love will. And here we go. Anybody knows this? Please feel the kick in. Love will guide us, Jesus guide us, hope inside us will be the way of the road, green to living, love will guide us through the if you can now sing like angels, if you can now speak your friends, you can hear from even you can change the world with love. Love will guide us, Jesus guide us, hope inside us
was great. Thanks, Jim. We support the work of this congregation through the gift of our time, our talents, and our treasure. Oh, but missed one, didn't I, John? Sorry. Go for it.
A traveler had come to a faraway country across a trackless desert. He'd seen no one for days, but now, as the land grew greener around him, he encountered a man struggling up a hill bearing a yoke on his shoulders. Suspended from the yoke, one on each side, were two large wicker baskets. As the man approached, the traveler looked into the baskets and saw nothing but stones. "Excuse me," the traveler said to the man. "If I may ask, what are you doing?" "I'm returning to my village," the man replied. "I mean," the traveler persisted, "what are the stones for?" "For building, I suppose. You look weary. You must have traveled a great distance to get just the right stones for construction." "Actually, no," the man said. "We have no shortage of stones in my village." "Then why?" The man took a deep breath. "I see you're from another country. You must know that after a certain time in our lives, we all carry baskets like this." The traveler said nothing, but his upturned palms begged for more of an explanation. "We're not born this way," the man continued. "We come into the world naked, just like babies everywhere. But as soon as we can walk, our parents give us tiny backpacks." "To collect stones?" "No, to gather hopes and dreams. As we grow in childhood, we get bigger backpacks. We need them to store all the hopes and dreams we pick up along the way. And then we take on the yoke of adulthood. It's light and willowy at first. Hopes and dreams don't weigh very much. But you've got stones," the traveler pointed out. "Ah, yes," the man said sadly. "As we age, our hopes and dreams turn into regrets and disappointments. They're a lot heavier, so we need to get yokes like this one, tough and strong." The traveler looked again into one of the baskets. They still looked like stones, but he could imagine them as heavy weights of remorse. And the ones in the other basket had all the markings of fate and death. But then he noticed among the dark-colored stones a few glistening ones. He asked the man about those. The man nodded toward the basket on his left. "Those are my fond memories," he said. And then, turning his head toward the basket on his right, he said, "Those are my few remaining hopes." "I see," the traveler said. "But one thing I don't understand, why don't you just throw the dark stones away and keep the shining ones?" "Oh, how I'd love to do that," the man said, "but it's impossible. People have tried, of course, but they're inseparable. It's like they're glued together." The traveler thought for a moment. Was it worth lugging that weight around constantly just to have an occasional glimpse of something bright? "It seems to me you'd be better off just dropping the whole thing and walking away." "If I did that," the man said, "I'd die. I mean, maybe not like my heart stopping. My body would probably live on, but it wouldn't be me anymore. All of what it is to be me is in those baskets." The man went on his way. As the traveler got nearer to civilization, he saw many people. The younger ones had light loads and seemed fairly happy. The older ones struggled with their heavy burdens, which seemed to be larger the more elderly the person was. The traveler felt sorry for these people. He tried to talk them into throwing down their yokes, but for many days he made no converts. Finally, one woman heaved a sigh and let her load drop to the ground. She straightened up and smiled. "I feel a lightness," she exclaimed excitedly. But then she went on in a more serious tone. There's just one thing. There's no me anymore. No Margaret living on from little girl to young woman to now, and then to a future that can only lead to death. It's like the person talking to you is just here and now and never was and never will be. The traveler was alarmed. Are you saying you have amnesia? I'd be very sorry to hear that I made you lose all memory. Oh no, the woman said, I remember, but it seems like those memories are of some other girls and women, not the one you're talking with now. And it seems like this me is flashing by. Already another me has taken its place. I'm not the same person I was when we met a moment ago, and I'm not the same person I will be either. Is that bad? The traveler asked with concern. The woman smiled. Oh no, not at all. It's wonderful. I have no regrets for the past and no future fears for the future. I'm just here in this place and in this moment. I am free.
Let it be. Thank you. We support the work of this congregation through the gift of our time, our talents, and our treasure. The basket we pass around is to help support the ongoing work of this congregation, including worship, religious exploration, and community care. And your generosity is reflected in the ways that we're able to show up for each other. The basket on the table in the back is for our Helping Hands Fund, which provides support to local organizations. If you're on Zoom, you can contribute right now using PayPal with the link in the chat. You can also send a check made out to UUCSF and mailed to our PO box. Be sure to put Sunday offering in the memo line. Now is a time in our community of shared faith when we share the deep joys, sorrows, and concerns of our hearts. For those of us in the meeting house, please come to the podium, speak into the mic, and I will light a candle for you. For those of you on Zoom, please unmute yourself and don't forget to share your name. If you have a joy or concern that you would like to share with the congregation behind the group here, you please use the link in the chat to share with the minister. Persistence will out. And now let's empty our minds of these sorrows, fears, and joys with no prayer or wish for something different. In an empty place for a minute or two of silence, let's welcome life as it is, the sun, the bird songs, the clouds, the coming autumn. So please rise as you're able to sing Just as Long as I Have Breath. Carl's going to play a video to lead us. And that video actually has the lyrics in it too. It's hymn number 6.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as visionless, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
One evening, about a year ago, I was sitting in my favorite spot, a book on my lap and a glass of wine on the table beside me. All of a sudden, a poem came to me. It was totally unbidden and unexpected, so that all I could do was grab a pen and write it down before it flitted away. I'd like to share this poem with you, but first I need to explain why one of the lines is in German. Shortly before this revelation, I was in a book discussion group where it was brought out that English and German have very different ways of saying that something exists. The Germans say es gibt, whereas we say there is. Es gibt, which literally means it gives, implies that there is someone to whom it is given, whereas there is does not. Es gibt mich, literally it gives me, implies a relationship. It translates to the English, I exist, which does not. The German line in the poem translates literally to, it gives me only when I die. The emotional impact that the poem had on me depended greatly on the vital importance of relationships. I'm putting the poem on the screen so that you can notice that some of the I's are lowercase, while only one, in the fourth line, is the usual uppercase I. Is it on the screen?
Yes, it is, but I'm sharing it with students.
Yeah. Titled Thou. My death is the only thing I own. All else is prelude. All else is borrowed. There is no I, capital, as long as I live. Es gibt mich nur, wann ich sterbe. And so, live in the present, hour by hour, each I a thing in itself. Whither the eyes that went and no longer are. Wonder the eyes that will be and are not yet. Yet not only those, all the eyes, wherever, whenever, whoever, one in joy and in pain. Above all is the thou, you whom I have encountered year by year. Wife, daughter, sister, mother, friend. I am clay half formed. Thou art the potter. Thou art God. The ego, the sense that there is something within us that defines our personhood and continues seamlessly over time, is almost universal among human beings. The ego evolved along with our extra large brains as one of the ways our genes promote their own reproduction. Up to the age where our reproductive capacity fades, it goads us to actions that promote our physical survival and our prospects with the opposite sex. Nevertheless, the ego is a delusion. The Buddha pointed that out 2.5 millennia ago. In that sense, there's nothing new here. But what Buddhists may find troublesome is the notion that in the prime of our lives, the ego can be a useful delusion. Belief in a continuing self encourages us to work for its fulfillment in our love, in our work, in our play, and in our larger aspirations. In the story I told in our first message, the young people's yokes are light and supple, and the hopes and dreams they carry don't weigh very much. Young people, unless they are unusually drawn to the contemplative life, need an ego sense. Without it, they are likely to flounder and lose their way. Sadly, in the second half of life, the ego's positive contributions to our flourishing give way to anguish and suffering. The ego intensifies that anguish, yet like some addictive substance, we cling to it all the harder, the more it stands in the way of our happiness and fulfillment. The midlife crisis is the ego's struggle to assert itself in the face of a death that is only then coming into view as an inevitability, as opposed to a rare and random occurrence among the young. Sometimes the ego wins out, and the person continues to behave as if he or she were still in the flower of youthful vigor. The longer this goes on, the more pitiable the case becomes. It's always sad for the person in question, but in the case of a narcissistic political leader, it can bring disaster onto the world. More often, there is a kind of truce in which one's resilient ego and one's gathering store of wisdom alternately win points. Only rarely is the ego truly overcome and replaced by something better. Each of us is not some metaphysical entity that persists over time, but instead is a series of events in space-time. We're like a movie film that appears to continue smoothly, but is in reality a succession of still photos. In the poem, the lowercase i's represent these events, these stills. They add up to the one big I only at the time of death. In the meantime, each little I can experience its moment unencumbered by the baggage of the past or fear of the future. Death is something that the little I speaking to you right now will never experience, but only the transition to the next little I. That doesn't mean we shouldn't make plans, but we should plan for our future little I's with our rational brains, even as we keep our hearts in the moment. In a very real sense, our future little I's are our children. A child who grows up with parents who defer the joys of the moment to dwell on past mistakes and future dangers is unlikely to become a happy adult. Fretting over our future little I's will not make them any happier either. But this insight poses two problems. One is that it makes personal immortality a less likely prospect. We are loath to give that up, which is one way the ego keeps us in bondage. Buddhists have a complex view of what happens after we die, denying the transfer of an immortal soul from one being to another, but affirming the reality of a continuing river of consciousness in which we are all embedded. I think there may be some truth in that, but in any case, what happens after I die will not be affected by what I believe now. If I heard on the radio that an asteroid was about to hit the Earth, whether I believed it or not would not matter as far as the asteroid was concerned. The asteroid would hit or not hit, regardless of what I believe. The only thing my belief would affect is how I feel and how I act. I try to appreciate that whatever about me was good will live on in the lives of those with whom I had relationships, and to hope that whatever about me has missed the mark will somehow dissipate. Nor is there a jealous and vindictive God who demands on pain of eternal pain that I believe what the church down the street tells me I must. That is the great-grandmother of all scams, which religions of various stripes have used for centuries to keep their members in line. We don't do that in our sacred space. The other problem with living in the moment is that sometimes the moment can be far from pleasant. There's no denying that. But for most of us, most of our present moments aren't so bad unless they're sapped of all color by the grayness of regret and fear. Living in the moment means that the present little I need not feel guilt over something bad that its previous little eyes did. It must only abjure that bad action and, if possible, make recompense to the other little eyes whose previous little eyes were injured by the little eyes that led to the one now having these thoughts. This little I need not worry about the future of the human race, planet Earth, or the universe. It is only love for all the future little eyes, everyone's eyes, not just the ones that will descend from the little I that is now speaking, that can motivate actions toward future goods. And if love is not enough, nothing is. In other words, without the thou, this insight would be empty and nihilistic. And just parenthetically, some people accuse Buddhism of being empty and nihilistic, but it's the emphasis on love and compassion that rescues it from that. Only if the deconstruction of the ego is accompanied by empathy and compassion for other living beings is the way open for love, hope, peace, and joy. I sometimes wish I were further along on that road than I am. But then I remember a sign that a secretary at the laboratory where I once worked had on her office wall. It said, "God isn't finished with me yet." I don't have to believe in the God of Genesis to relate to that. Intellectual insights such as these can't by themselves prevent existential anxiety. The ego dies hard. That's where spiritual practices come in. Their purpose is to loosen the ego's tenacious grip and ultimately to free us from it. Such practices can take many forms, not all of which involve sitting motionless for long periods of time. What is a spiritual practice for one person might not be for another. If it helps you to loosen your ego's grip without collateral damage to yourself or to others, it's a spiritual practice. I'd say go for it. If you open your mind and heart to the possibility that your ego will finally fall away, maybe it will. This can't be hurried, nor should it be, especially if you are young. Don't worry if it only seems to loosen a bit. That is still a blessing. To sum this all up, the task of the first half of life is to construct one's ego creatively. The task of the second half of life is creatively to give it away. Regardless of one's spiritual progress, there's no way to make death easy. Even Buddhists need to prepare. As for the traditionally religious in our culture, people who believe in immortal souls cry just as much at funerals as those who don't. Maybe more if they're bogged down by a fear that their beloved might be damned to eternal fire. Charles Darwin's wife loved him dearly and was afraid he would be damned because of his theory. At the risk of seeming trite, I feel her pain. Whatever we believe, the price we pay for love is the pain of leave-taking. Perhaps the supreme comfort on facing death is to be able to reach out to those soon to be left behind, to look death in the eye and still say yes to life. That is the last best gift we can give to those we love. I hope I'll have the necessary courage when my time comes.
Thank you, John. Now, for those of you on Zoom, as always, the meeting will remain open for a few minutes after service for you to talk back and forth. For those of you in the meeting house, we invite you to join us in the fellowship room for light refreshments and fellowship. If you are visiting for the first time or the 50th time, if you are in agreement with our values, our mission, and our UU principles, we hope you will find a home here. Now let's rise as you're able to sing hymn number 95, There's More Love Somewhere. Jim will lead us in singing this.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. At the kingdom till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more
The R is a belief which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Its profession of faith, divine living. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now let's sit back for a couple of minutes and enjoy Jim Turner. Thank you. Thank you.